Anti-Mage and Isekai LitRPG Adventure, Ends of Magic Book 1, audiobook by Kevin Chapter 7 Archives of the Ages. Nathan glanced back at his new students, who were laying into their lunch with gusto. I need 2 weeks to teach them. Do you look at me and see a fool? Feline spat. That time will allow Bada to return without injury. Giant's Rest is wounded, but their revenge will be terrible if we allow them their recovery. She nodded decisively, green eyes flashing. The city will already be locked down, harshly enough that we cannot enter. We must wait until the social scene of Giant's Rest is reborn and the adamant curtain is lifted. There will be power struggles for the positions of the dead archmages. With Declan dead, the city of Argeless is without a master, and that alone will cause conflict amongst them. If we are wise with our butchery, we can use their greed, turn the mages against each other before Badad can gather them into his palm once more. Her gaze was flat. To strike that target, we must leave in 5 days and enter the first moment the lockdown is finished. The assassin's surety was intoxicating. Nathan could almost see her plan unfolding. They'd sneak in as Giant's Rest began to recover from the disastrous battle. There would be uncertainty in the streets and chaos in the academy as the death of so many senior mages sank in. Then they'd strike. Nathan and Feline would sneak into places that were supposed to be safe and kill mages to instill panic. They'd do it in a way that would turn mages against each other and sow discord across the city. He didn't know exactly how, but Feline did. Giant's Rest would know that the fight had come to them. It would be like Halsmith, when Nathan had killed an archmage and evaded capture. That had sowed fear, which he'd harvested by striking with impunity in the days following. Only this time, the mages wouldn't have anywhere safe to flee to. He found himself nodding along, altering his plans to make Feline's story into a reality. Then he caught himself. Training up anti-mages for Halsmith is important. They are going to need people to fight monsters and dungeons, not to mention mages. But if we wait too long, Badad will recover from a cursed blade to the gut and rally Giant's Rest around his cause again. Then he might decide to inflict some retribution. I might be able to fly now and defend myself from his wizardry, but there's no way I can defend the entire city from an earthquake spell. We need to go on the offensive, and soon. This is our best chance. Nathan frowned, considering how much time he could reasonably cut off the training course. He met Feline's bright eyes, ignoring the provocative way her hand slid down her hip. 10 days. 6. She returned, blinking slowly. He bit his lip in thought. She was bargaining, so there seemed to be some wiggle room to the timing. 8. Any less and I won't be able to teach them anything material about the anti-magic talent. I have other insights that will help them master their anti-magic. Feline tilted her head slightly. Will you set them on the same path that you follow, place the blades in their hand and shepherd them through their first levels? That will lead to dim flames and shrouded paths. She stepped closer and smiled wide, the sunlight glinting from sharpened teeth. Give them the insights to challenge Davrar, and those that survive will become dragons. Think of your own path. It started in the tower of an archmage. Every morsel of safety will smother their fire. Nathan glanced back towards the 22 students who remained. A few of them were looking in his direction, elbowing others and pointing towards Feline surreptitiously. Some of them are going to die trying to follow in my footsteps. I might be able to give them more knowledge, help them be better. But it comes at the cost of giving Giant's Rest more time. Even if an extra day of training might save a life, it could doom this city. But if I can't teach them regeneration, and a little bit about anti-magic, then I should just call this whole training off. He turned back to Feline, seeing her tilt her head and smile, satisfied that he'd decided in her favor. Nathan frowned at her ability to read him, then shrugged. 7 days from today. Any less and I shouldn't teach them at all. Her smile turned into a pout, eyes wide and innocent while her lips became full and red. 6 would be better, please. Pouting is not an expression I ever expected to see on her face. Seven or I cancel this whole thing. Don't you want to recruit more anti-magic assassins in the future? She snorted, rolling her eyes and giving up the coquettish expression to speak bluntly. If I need to recruit more assassins, we have failed. But you wish to hit every target at the risk of striking none at all. I will meet you at dawn in 7 days, and together we will bring a prophecy of death onto Giant's Rest. Nathan frowned, but still saluted. See you then. Feline performed an elaborate bow that Nathan had never seen before. He didn't know how to react, but she solved the problem by activating her stealth skills and fading from view. He watched as she slipped through the shadows and out the open gate. The candidates behind him reacted in alarm when she vanished, and Nathan snorted as a few of them looked around wildly. He walked back over and clapped his hands together to draw their attention. Okay, let's talk about regeneration and focused mind. High-tier lecturing aid achieved. Nathan knocked on the door of Sudriel's co-opted office in the basement of the governmental mansion, unsure if she was still up. It was late, but some of the adventurers had indicated that she was planning to leave tomorrow. He needed to talk to her before then. The door was opened by Netta. The young mage squinted suspiciously before she recognized him. "Oh, Nathan, I was about to tell you to check the time and go screw a muck grabber. Come in." "Where are the rest of the old hands?" he asked, looking around for the other members of her team. Netta sighed. "Dissolving. Caro tried to hold on, but she's not Delric. We followed her for the battle, but," she shrugged, communicating that the whole situation was complicated. "She's staying to train and lead a team in Housemate, but the others are returning to join others in Gemor. I work with Sudriel now." "Neat. Apprenticing in how to guildmistress," Nathan joked. That would be a target to hit." Sudriel's voice came from further in the office. "Hear me, her succeeding me would be a blessing from the divine. But no, she apprentices in the true work of the guild. Administration." The last word was spat like a curse. Nathan wandered in, looking for Sudriel in the offices where Mila and her fellow scribes had toiled for years. The space was mostly cleared out, and Nathan saw Sudriel shoveling spare paper into a dimensional bag. She saw his questioning look and returned the gaze unself-consciously. "Gemor doesn't make paper. I will take every scrap I can find." She set down the bag on a nearby desk. "It's good you've come. Feline left me a note that you two will attempt to destroy Giant's Rest." The old woman snorted and sat heavily in a chair behind the desk, waving him in. "What words? I never believed I'd say them, not even as a game, but we've followed your light to this place and I have little regret. What did you come to say to me?" Nathan took the seat she indicated as Netta sat down off to the side. "That's fine. Netta's good people, and this doesn't need to be private. Yeah, Feline and I are going to Giant's Rest soon. Feline's got a plan to set them against each other. We need to knock them off balance before Badad can reorganize. It's got to be political chaos over there with 3 archmages dead, not to mention all of the other casualties from the battle." He was struck by a sudden thought and went off on a tangent. "I killed Chennel Dho Pelogi on the battlefield. That was Harthai's father, right? You might want to be careful how she learns about it." Sudriel waved a hand dismissively. "She bears little love for her father. Remember that she worked for Tial to catch his attention. This further severs her ties to the City of Giants, which is good. She has shown herself a capable enchanter and is set to receive her own shop soon." The elderly guildmistress interlaced her hands on the desk, her translucent skin whitening under even the gentle pressure. She didn't say anything, just cocking one eyebrow at him. Nathan felt sheepish. "That's not what I came to talk to you about. I want to start a library of insights, available for all adventurers to browse and find ways to improve their builds. I think it will strengthen Gemor." Her head tilted. Sudriel studied him. "You are leaving for Giant's Rest soon. You say you wish to do this, but truly you wish me to start this project with the resources of the Adventurers Guild." She sighed and shook her head. "And you think this idea is new? I saw this light decades ago." I plan to call it the Adventurer Archive. I have been working towards such a thing since before I became guild mistress. She glanced over at Netta, who looked even more surprised than Nathan. Hear me, the young ones think they're the only ones with plans. A dungeon of fools, all of you. I plan to unveil the plans for the archive soon, she continued. With Halsmit captured and Khazar dead, there will be little to smother my fire. Jalba is building a bunker for it, carved into the mountain underneath the guild. I have a dozen weighty insights ready to be inscribed onto tablets within. Nathan took a second to adapt, but then he nodded. Bah, I feel like my thunder's been stolen. This is definitely better, though. She's clearly been thinking this through for a while, probably has all the little details figured out. Her eyes landed on Nathan with a serene superiority. Do you wish to contribute to the archive? He looked back at her for a moment, completely unsure what to say. Yes, good. I was expecting to need to convince you. Sudriel rolled her eyes hard enough that only the whites showed. Nathan forged ahead, suddenly defensive. I suppose great minds think alike. Gemor definitely needs some powerful insights that are common so people can make decent builds even if they don't inherit insights from their families. Do you want to make standardized builds like the Agman legionaries? No. The guildmistress shook her head emphatically. I will urge people to design their own builds. Standardized builds are a trap. Those legionaries are powerful, but they have their weaknesses. Agman has designed their military doctrine around that build, and they will be slow to change. I expect gun-wielding bows to defeat them handily for the next 50 years until they raise a new generation. She snorted bleakly. After that, it's not my problem. I'll be dead in 20 years and Jalba will follow the same flame if he retains the guild. The guildmistress reached into a dimensional pouch and pulled out 3 glasses and a bottle of fluorescent blue liquid. She poured a couple of fingers into each glass and slid one over to Nathan and the other to Netta. Don't look like you smelled a muck grabber, girl, Sudriel said, gesturing with her glass. If you're to be my apprentice, you need to get used to thinking of the future beyond prophecy. The politics and dirty truths that adventurers can't kill. That's the job of the guild and those who manage it. She met Netta's eyes with a stern glare, then swapped her focus to Nathan. Know that I wish to hold the knowledge of the archive close. Not even the guardians know, so do not tell them, either of you. I will dispel the illusion soon enough. She took a sip of her drink and leaned back, looking satisfied. Nathan noticed that the drink was heavy with cold mana, and he withdrew his aura to feel the icy liquid on his tongue. The taste was sharp and floral, like a gin made with lavender. Netta sputtered on the drink. Sudriel chuckled. You'll also need to manage your alcohol, an important insight for a guildmistress. Her expression sobered as she turned back to Nathan. The Adventurer Archive will only be open to those the guildmaster approves. We must keep the secrets within safe, and only those trusted by the guild will be allowed within. Nathan frowned, sipping at the drink again while he thought. After a moment he shook his head. Then you'll have 2 castes within the guild, the people you trust and the people you don't. It'll be a constant source of resentment and will undermine the entire purpose of the archives. The time people need it the most is before they've had the chance to prove themselves. You have hit a target, but not the only one. The guildmistress sighed, waving her glass around in frustration. The archive will make adventurers more powerful, and that power must be entrusted carefully. There's no other path. It would be better to trust all of the adventurers, Nathan retorted, earning another eye roll from the old woman sitting across the table from him. Blasphemously good idea. Let's trust the ending of history to be an easy target too, shall we? This isn't the same as classifying information. This is like only teaching engineering courses to people with classified clearance. Actually, that gives me an idea. It'll poison the guild to block off all of the insights within, he protested. You already have problems with adventurers acting on their own, hurting the guild with infighting or even outright betraying you. You've been trying to unify the guild, but this will make that worse, not better. Yeah, like the pack leaders, the ones who tried to capture me on a promise from Tial. He continued. As Gemor expands and becomes more powerful, there are going to be more opportunities for adventurers to abuse their power. There will be more villages and cities spread over more territory, which means that they'll be able to abuse villagers, attack other adventurers, or just do a bad job because they feel resentful that they're denied the archive. Sudriel nodded along begrudgingly, taking a sip of her drink and gesturing for him to go on. That's a separate problem from the archive, but the archive will make it worse. You need a group inside the adventurers whose job is to police them. Call it internal review, and that's where you put your trusted adventurers. Then you have a mechanism to ensure nobody is abusing your insights, and you aren't kneecapping the archive before it can even get started. She frowned again but didn't speak immediately. Nathan took the moment to add one more idea, inspired by his previous musings about teaching Stella. You can hide away the truly dangerous insights, make them only accessible to mature, trustworthy adventurers on the right path. Things that could cause incredible destruction. He held up a finger to emphasize his next point. But all adventurers need access to most of it, enough powerful insights to design a powerful build. The guildmistress looked annoyed at his argument, and she eyed him over the rim of her glass. What insights would you contribute to the archive? Nathan was surprised by the non sequitur, but he responded honestly. Regeneration, maybe noticeability and focused mind. I've only gotten regeneration written out, but I can get the rest in the next few days. He set the condensed version of the regeneration insight on the table. Sudriel seemed deep in thought, though she acknowledged the weight of Nathan's insight with a dip of her head. I was also going to turn over a bunch of the favors I'm owed. That's a few from the Guardians, though Kia said she wanted to add a few to the library regardless. There's also a really big one from the Bows. I also had the Bows extract a favor from everybody who wanted a gun, and I was going to turn those over as well. I was going to use it as my primary leverage for the library, but all of that should go into the archive instead. The guildmistress barely managed to avoid a spit take, coughing on a sip of liquor. Dragon's breath, really, he nodded, and Sudriel leaned back again, clearly giving his argument a second thought, and then a third. It is a different angle to strike from. An internal review which investigates reports of wrongdoing. A careful hand would be essential. I would be okay with denying access to the archive as a punishment, Nathan said. And don't make everybody you trust part of internal review, or the most powerful adventurers. It needs to be a job, not a status. In fact, you should put some honorable traditionalists in it, people who won't turn a blind eye to injustice. The guildmistress seemed to be considering the idea, and they spent a while longer talking over the details. Nathan reached back in his memories for everything he remembered of this kind of internal affairs department on Earth. Most of it was from TV and books, and thus of dubious accuracy, but they provided ideas on how to structure the new arm of the Adventurers Guild. Netta got more involved as the discussion continued, contributing some ideas of her own before they circled back around to the archive. Sudriel spent some time talking about everything she'd planned for the Adventurer Archive. She'd spent an enormous amount of time planning the security, only surpassed by how much effort had gone into figuring out how to present it to Gemor so people would feel motivated to contribute powerful insights. It's all about weight and status, she explained, 3 drinks in and just a little tipsy. The insights in the archive need to be powerful enough to become part of many adventurers' builds. Then it becomes a matter of pride to have contributed. With the citations engraved across the top of each insight, all will know who contributed a lasting boon to Gemor. It will be part of the pride of an adventuring family to contribute weighty insights to the archive. She swirled the remnants of her last drink and downed it. Her voice was cynical. If we're favored by prophecy and Algoa, it may even work. Netta had drunk half as much, but the small, nulled woman clearly didn't share the older guildmistress' tolerance. She laid a careless hand on the older woman's shoulder and slurred slightly. "It'll be blasphemously good. You're smart and this'll make Gemor better." "She's right," Nathan said through an amused smile. "Even if it takes a while to catch on, just having some powerful insights available will help the new adventurers from the villages. More will survive and level. They'll contribute more insights in gratitude to pay it forward. This will work. You've been working for a long time to change the culture, so it will work." Nathan waved his hand around, indicating the city around them. "And if anybody disagrees, just point to what we can accomplish when the adventurers work together and stop hiding insights from each other." The guildmistress shook her head and grabbed the 3 empty glasses to tuck back into her pouch. "Teach a mage to light a fire. You're the one who freed this city, then beat the army. Killed 4 archmages, Tial, the army. The water thing was Arl's idea." Sudriel rolled her eyes and gave him a shooing gesture. "Go, it is late. I thank you for the ideas and the support." She held up the papers that held the description of the regeneration inside. "Though I need to think on how to carve this into stone. It might need a room." Nathan left the meeting confident that everything he'd wanted from his library would be accomplished by Sudriel's Adventurer Archive. "You know, I think the archive might be something great, though it might become a dungeon in a few hundred years." He shrugged on his way to bed. You could plan for the future, but some risks had to be taken. The next morning, he woke his anti-mage candidates before dawn to run sprints. Then he started quizzing them on his lectures from the day before during breathers, assigning more sprints for wrong answers. Sham answered perfectly, the heavy teenager dodging any extra running with a desperation born of breathlessness. His sister Hedel only got one question wrong, though she whispered her answers so quietly Nathan had to strain to hear them. Raf kept getting questions wrong but did his extra running in good humor, his developed physique and intensity carrying him through the punishment exercise. Nathan was a bit disappointed in Shy, the dark-haired girl who'd flirted with him. She tried to drift away from his gaze and avoid eye contact to prevent him from asking her questions, but Nathan rigorously kept track of engagement and singled her out regardless. High-tier lecturing 9 achieved. He lost 6 more students that day and considered it a fair trade. Chapter 8 Skill Lessons. "I need to drop a utility skill," Nathan said, taking another bite of stew. He had given his anti-mage trainees a night of rest and was having dinner with the heirs. He only had 9 students left, but they all seemed committed to learning anti-magic. The final test would come in a few days when they attempted to gain the regeneration talent. But for now, he was taking a break to hang out with his friends. There was a tiny bit of distance between them now, since Nathan wasn't coming with them on missions outside the city. The heirs had been adventuring in the wilderness around Housemint, keeping the farm safe and giving elites a demonstration of how to hunt wood stalkers. "That's a heavy statement. What do you mean?" Kachai responded from across the table, where he was cleaning vegetables out of his teeth. Nathan sighed. He'd been thinking about this for a couple days and had decided to get some input. "I need an aura manipulation skill for my anti-magic. I can spread it over such a large area and use it to direct magic, but the limiting factor is always my control. I can't do anything but a cloud if I make it big, and I can't reach as far as I think I should be able to. I can't really disable one enchantment from a group of them unless I'm touching an object." Stella gave him a questioning look. "Sorry to raise the past, but how large can you spread your anti-magic?" "About the size of this building," Nathan replied, but then quickly corrected himself as all of the heirs looked up in surprise. They were in Exia's old mansion, which was several stories tall and had sprawling wings. But at that range, it's not very dense. It would make it harder to cast magic, draining spells of power instead of completely denying them. A fireball would still explode, but only at half power. I would also slowly degrade all of the magic items in range. I need to condense it down a lot to really deny magic effectively, and I can only do that when it's a lot closer to me. Sounds like a good target, Sarah said, gnawing on a bone she'd found in her bowl. She pointed it at him. The heavy question is, what utility skill do you drop? Nathan pursed his lips. A few options. I've always thought of lecturing as a skill I was eventually going to drop, but it's developed twice and been pretty useful. Don't drop that one. Stella interrupted loudly. Your insights are difficult enough already and you're teaching other people now. He shrugged. Yeah, that's my thought. I see why it's common for temporary skills to become permanent. Once you've developed it a few times, it's hard to give up. Anyway, another option is a skill I picked up for stealth, quiet movement. It was useful when sneaking around Housemate at night. Arl tilted his head. Overlapping skills are powerful. You want to be sneaky, and multiple stealth skills are how you hit that target. Nathan nodded, but he wasn't so sure. Right, but it hasn't been relevant since we freed Housemate. I don't make much sound when airwalking. I'm not sure it might develop to something good when it goes unique. Kacha crossed his arms, pushing away his empty bowl and the utensil he'd been using to clean his teeth. Are those the sole options? No, there's also Battle Cry. It's been useful for intimidating people and warning about danger, but I'm not sure it fits with the rest of my build. Nathan shrugged. I do need some kind of aura manipulation skill, but I'm not sure what skill to drop or who to learn it from. Kacha's voice was confident. My mother will have this knowledge. She will teach you such a skill without regret. Nathan blinked, but decided not to ask why Kia knew the insights for an aura skill when she didn't have an aura. Okay, then what skill should I drop? Arl rubbed his chin, considering. Battle Cry and lecturing have both proven their worth to my sight. Battle Cry, let you draw the attention of the army so they attacked you instead of us. Lecturing has helped us all gain insights. Hear me, that skill caused the destruction of the old Gemor construct army. Stella narrowed her eyes at that comment but didn't disagree. Quiet movement could be just as important, Sarah said, cocking an eyebrow at her brother. She glanced back to Nathan. How much have you ranked up each skill? That will weigh the regret you'll carry. Lecturing started as low tier and now it's high tier 9, Nathan replied. Sarah snorted, cutting him off. That skill is worth its weight in adamant. You were trained in teaching. You'll be able to develop that to unique. Keep it, especially for your antimages. The rest of the heirs voiced their agreement. Nathan crossed lecturing off of his mental list, nodding in reply to Sarah. Yeah, good point. Quiet movement is low tier 4 and Battle Cry is mid tier 7. It started out in mid tier. That's a clear target, Arl said, reaching over to grab Sarah's bowl of stew. She swatted his hand and he looked hurt, shaking his head in mock disapproval before turning back to Nathan. You don't need quiet movement and it's not very powerful. Drop it and get an aura manipulation skill. By that metric, I should at least consider dropping disguise. It's the only other low-tier skill I have, but I want to go to Giant's Rest and disguise lets me hide in plain sight. After seeing how Feline moves around, I think I should prioritize skills that make it seem like I belong over skills that let me move unseen. Besides, she gave me the insight for disguise, while I just kind of picked up quiet movement, randomly. After a moment of thought, Nathan nodded back at Arl. Yeah, quiet movement is a good candidate. He turned to Stella. Can you ask your parents to tell Kia what I want? And also that I'm hoping we can meet soon. Stella agreed, pulling her bowl closer as Arl scanned the table for more food. They'll come back before you leave. My parents want to hunt a castle bear with us since they killed all the ones around Gemor decades ago. Go get yourself another bowl with dessert as an extra target, Sarah said, pointing her brother towards the door. He eats more now than he did as a child, more than I ever did even before I changed. He's spending his energy on many things, Stella said mysteriously, wiggling her eyebrows. Kacha looked confused. Are you speaking of his amorous? Yes, yes, I am, Stella choked out, flushing slightly. That's the only thing I could mean, Nathan chuckled. Who's he been sleeping with recently? I hope he hasn't broken many hearts. Sarah replied in a surly tone. He was flirting with Lilus Miela's second. She smothered his fire quick as that. She snapped her fingers to demonstrate how quickly Arl had been shot down. Kachai licked out his own bowl, eyeing the sniper. Watching her gaze, that would be your nemesis to slay. Now it was Sarah's turn to look uncomfortable, and she changed the subject. Nathan, how fare your students? Are they learning the insights of an anti-mage? He chuckled and answered in detail, giving the heirs an overview of what he'd done so far. Once Arl had returned bearing a platter loaded with small, sweetened cakes, Nathan launched into his plan for the future. In 2 days, I'm going to see if they can get the regeneration talent. Anybody who succeeds gets anti-magic. Then we train that for 1 day before I leave. Only 1 day for anti-magic? Stella asked curiously. For anti-mage candidates, that's a strange target. Anti-magic is the easy insight, Nathan summarized. I think I can essentially grant it to people without much preamble, and after that it's innate, not the sort of thing you need classroom instruction on. But regeneration has to be learned the hard way, and it's the much more important talent. Once they have regeneration, they'll be much more likely to survive learning how to use their anti-magic. He held up one finger. But the final part of the regeneration, insight, is using stamina to regrow a missing body part, preferably an arm. He looked around seriously to ensure they understood what he was proposing. Kachai, can you heal a missing arm? In case someone can't get the talent, that's the critical part. I'm not about to cut off limbs until I know we can grow them back. The wolfman frowned in disapproval. This is not the appropriate use of my power. Such wounds would not be earned in righteous battle. The power of the divine expects to be used judiciously. Nathan returned the expression. There weren't a lot of healers that could restore severed limbs, and they tended to both be expensive and not willing to leave Gemor. It would take a lot of favors and money to get one out to Houseman. Kachai's divine magic was tailored for defense, healing, and inspiration, so Nathan had been hoping it was an easy solution to his problem. These are not wounds sustained lightly, Nathan said, choosing his words carefully. Those who need healing will have taken a desperate risk to gain the ability to protect their home. They bring personal danger upon themselves so that they may better defend their community and their city. Will you be able to heal their wounds? The tinge of divine mana pulsed in Kachai's eyes. He returned Nathan's gaze and nodded deeply. With that context, they are worthy. Extinguish your doubt, for I will heal your students when they are in need. Then Nathan turned to Arl. Can you do the cutting? I need clean and fast. His friend bowed his head seriously and patted the pouch that contained his weaponry. I can bear this burden. Stella can cauterize the wounds to prevent blood loss. The mage nodded hesitantly, then after a moment more decisively. I can do that. Great, Nathan said, sighing and leaning back. Come to the courtyard where we killed Tial in 2 days in the middle of the afternoon. Nathan turned to Sarah. Can you come by tomorrow morning? I've got an exercise I think you can help with. The sniper shrugged and looked around at her team. We can leave in the afternoon to hunt that pseudo-worm, yeah. They all agreed, and then Stella broke in with excitement. I forgot I haven't told you about my new class. I took Avatar of Mana, and I can charge up a lightning capacitor in about 20 seconds now. I'm also working on learning water mana from an old scroll. I almost have it. Nathan chuckled. He looked around at the other heirs. How much was left of the last monster you fought? Arl held 2 fingers about a half-inch apart. That was the biggest piece left, from a terror ghast. No, Nathan yelled, pelting Raph in the stomach with a rock. The young man was airborne, having jumped to dodge a blunted hatchet Sarah had thrown at his knees. It meant he was locked into a trajectory and could do nothing about Nathan's rock. He folded around the stone and fell to the ground, the wind knocked out of him. Unless you have skills to move in midair, jumping just makes you an easy target, Nathan said, walking up to Raph to offer him a hand up. The intense man refused the offer, jumping to his feet and glaring back at Nathan. He didn't argue, just reset himself to go again. At this point, Nathan knew that Raph wasn't angry at him. At least not mostly. Raph was angry at Davrar, angry at Giant's Rest, angry at everything that had held him down. He never quit and never turned down additional training, even when the 19-year-old was falling asleep on his feet and could barely move. He'll definitely make it to the end, and if he gets regeneration, he'll level fast. I'm worried he's gonna die fighting something he really should run away from. Raph, sit down. Shy, it's your turn. The dark-haired young woman got up from where she'd been sitting, massaging a bruised leg. Her face was full of spite, and Nathan was pretty sure she was angry at him. She'd clearly worked out that he'd expected her to quit after refusing to give her any special treatment for being gorgeous. He'd been a little harder on her every time she tried to flirt with him. It appeared to have caused her to persevere out of spite. She wanted to prove him wrong, and he was fine with that. One more student hadn't shown up to training this morning, and Nathan was starting to worry about losing more, though he was pretty sure that the 8 remaining students would stick it out. If nothing else, Sham was going to stay around because he just had so many questions for Nathan. It seemed like he had a learning or memory skill, and Nathan would be shocked if the short, pudgy teenager didn't manage to learn regenerate. If he doesn't, that means nobody will, and it's not feasible for me to teach the talent this way. Sham's sister Hedel was also in it for the long run. She was taller than her brother with the same dark skin and hair, though hers was long and straight to his short curls. She didn't seem to care much about pain or suffering, or social status. Instead, Hedel cared about her brother and wanted to stay with him and protect him. She didn't speak unless she had to, but when he asked her a direct question, she always answered completely and concisely. Everything she did seemed designed to attract as little attention as possible. Nathan had wondered about their pasts, what kinds of slaves they'd been, but he'd decided he didn't need to know. If his students wanted to talk about themselves, he would listen, but he wouldn't go digging into their pasts uninvited. He was afraid that what he might learn would change how he treated them. Besides, I think therapists are becoming a respected profession here. Everybody in Housemate has trauma, and the people who started out helping newly freed slaves have started to develop builds for that. They're more qualified than I am to help with any issues here. If I had more time, I would go find one myself, but I really don't. Good, he called out as Shy dodged all of the rocks. She was good at reading people and had quick reflexes. She'd managed to dodge most of their attacks, even when Nathan had fainted and then thrown at the same time as Sarah. Neither of them were going all out, which was definitely a good thing. If he activated Raging Thrill and spent stamina and focus, Nathan was pretty sure that he could hit a fly with a 120-mile-per-hour fastball. Not only did the two resources synergize to an incredible extent, but all of Nathan's body and skill enhancements added up. He didn't want to know what Sarah was capable of. Her recent skills were more directed towards long-range firearms, but she still had many of the skills that had let her sink a javelin into a stalker eye on their blooding patrol. And now, she was much higher level, so all of those skills were even more powerful than before. Nathan gave Sarah a fist bump as they finished up the dodging portion of training, and she rose to leave. She jogged out of the gate of the ruined mansion, heading to the front gates to rendezvous with the other heirs and go kill the latest monster. Meanwhile, Nathan turned to his students as they nursed bruises. He rubbed his hands together and started yelling. An antimage cannot wear armor. We're going to go through those footwork drills again, now that you know what they're for. After that, it's time to talk about mental exercises. You will need mental skills. Anti-magic will protect you from charm and dominate, but a slave master can still command you, and they also help you with pain management and the regeneration insight. Now up, Let's go." The students got to their feet with various degrees of stoicism, and Nathan started leading them through the quick pivots and driving knees that bore a lot of similarity to dance training. Leadership 9 achieved. High-tier lecturing 10 achieved. Hey, Egal. It had taken some time to find her, which was fitting for somebody who specialized in invisibility and stealth magic. He'd eventually asked Lilus and been pointed to this unassuming two-story mansion just within the inner city. It was the same place that they'd climbed together to clamber across the wall and into the outer city right after he'd freed her. The building was large but isolated, located away from any major thoroughfares. Now he stood at the entrance, waving at Egal past the older woman that had opened the door at his knock. "Can I come in? I want to talk about a few things." The pale mage seemed surprised to see him, but she waved him inside after a moment of hesitation. She looked stressed and tired. Nathan looked around as they walked through the corridors, seeing dozens of curious faces watching as Egal ushered him through the house. They were almost entirely women, mostly in their 30s and 40s with worn hands and tired eyes. There were traces of shadow mana clinging to several of them, indicating magic training. He surreptitiously checked for mental spells on everybody and found nothing. "It's not that I don't trust Egal, but it's worth verifying. They're hidden away over here and I know she has basic mind magic." The sharply pretty mage gestured him into an office, then closed the door and cast muffle. "Are these all of your trainees?" Nathan asked curiously. She nodded tiredly, sighing and leaning back behind the enormous desk. "Yes, this is all of them. I wanted to keep them together, and Mila gave me a free hand in candidates and resources." The room looked like it had been the office of the head of the household. A small cot sat in the corner, and a few personal possessions were scattered across the room. A bowl of plain and unseasoned porridge sat on the desk, cold and gelatinous. "You're sleeping here," he said, looking around and seeing very few traces of luxury. There was a dresser in the corner that seemed messily stuffed with fine cloth, but that was it. "Surely there are some nicer beds in this place." Egal waved a hand around the room. "I'm the only mage of Giant's Rest left in this city. The mana won't flow clean if I indulge in luxuries. Besides, each of those beds sleep four now, and I prefer to sleep alone." She gave him a questioning look, subtly asking why he was here. Nathan nodded in acknowledgement to her silent question. "Sorry to burst in here with all of these questions. I wanted to check in on you, ask if you needed anything. I'm going to be leaving Housemit soon, and I wanted to ask if you could do something for my own trainees. I think I'm going to leave between 3 and 5 antimages here in Housemit. Oled and his elites will take over their martial training, but I want them partnered with the mages they'll end up working with. It's important for anti-magic to have magic to practice on." Nathan leaned back in his comfortable chair, giving her time to think things through. Egal took that time before responding. "I'm glad to hear we will have anti-mages. I know Mila has already thanked you, but I know the weight of that insight and what it can do against Giant's Rest." Her hand drifted up to her neck where the delicate slave collar had once sat. She tilted her head from side to side, eyes distant. "My most advanced students are all weaving the same color, but they're months away from casting on the field of battle. I can pick the ones I think will work well with your students." "What are they like?" Nathan snorted, amused. "Intense. I'm picking people who can push through whatever they need to. All but one have strong personalities. The one Heddle is shy, but she should be listened to. I think she's going to make it." Egal nodded sharply. "With your insight and a few tips from Gale, I have gained a second class and reached level 27, Teacher of Magic. One of my new class skills helps me find partners who will work well together. In a few days I will meet your antimages and decide who to partner them with. It would be good to begin team training before my trainees become too distant from the rest of Housemit." She rubbed at her forehead. "I would consider it a giant's blessing to never level my mage class again." "Congratulations," Nathan said, deciding not to comment on her last sentence. "I'm happy you're doing this. Is there anything else I can help with?" Egal gave the question some more thought before shaking her head. "No. I will consider those best suited to work with antimages, a few bold and one calm." He slapped his own thighs and stood. "Okay, the final test for the antimages is tomorrow if you want to come. In the afternoon, the second mansion." She shook her head, not saying anything. Nathan didn't often use his leadership skill in normal conversations, but he did now. "If I don't see you again for a while, remember that you're doing a good job here. This is hard, and as long as you're trying, you haven't failed." She'd never been responsible for people before, and now dozens of students were dedicated to learning from her. It was obvious the responsibility was weighing on the young woman. "Thank you," she said quietly, then walked him back to the front door and held it open. As he left, he heard her whisper. It was quiet enough that he wasn't sure he was supposed to hear it. "May you topple the giant." Chapter 9. Antimagic Descendancy. Nathan watched proudly as the 7 remaining antimage candidates lined up in the ruined courtyard, chairs waiting behind them for the events later in the day. He described what was going to happen, and given his remaining students another chance to opt out before they got their arms cut off. "I'm pleased with how hard you've all worked," he said to them all, holding his hands behind his back. "No matter how this afternoon goes, I'll put in a good word with Oled. You'll be able to join the fighter training, even if not as an antimage." A group of people entered through the gate, causing Nathan to look up from his students. To his mild surprise, it was Mila, along with most of the other leaders of the newly formed Housemate Council. Nathan recognized Lilus and Cameron, but there were almost a dozen more he didn't know. They carried a few large platters of food, which got placed on tables set along the back of the courtyard. The whole group was guarded by 2 elites. Nathan offered a Gemor salute to the mayor of Housemate as she approached. "I asked for some extra food, but I wasn't expecting you to deliver it. We'll only find out how many of the trainees will be able to learn antimagic in an hour or 2. After that, I'll give them 1 more day of training. Then you can assign them to teams and free up this compound." The elderly woman shaded her eyes as she looked at the 7 people standing in a line. She nodded firmly and pitched her voice to Carrie. "Those who succeed will stay in this mansion. Their teams will come to them. This is the first class of Housemate antimages. I beseech prophecy that it will not be the last. This manor will house the antimages of Housemate as long as they exist. Succeed, and become a force that safeguards our city." Nathan's eyebrows shot up, and he looked over the crowd of attendees in a new light as the antimage candidates stood a little straighter. "She's making this into a ceremony, trying to build the antimages into an institution. A bit bold, given that I'm currently the only one who can make new antimages." He pursed his lips, trying to decide if he wanted to challenge this new direction, or if he felt offended she hadn't discussed this with him first. "Not especially. I want Housemate to succeed, and I explicitly offered to train antimages without strings attached so long as I got complete control over their training. I'll probably be willing to train more later if I like where they're going, and if there is a later." He snorted softly, considering the relative status of the new home of Housemate's antimages versus the place where their mages were being trained. Egal's tucked away in an unobtrusive corner, while this is the 2nd most prestigious building in the city. It's a bit worse for the wear, but I'm sure that'll get fixed once they finish rebuilding the slums. It's a statement of values, and one tailored to my ego. But it makes sense for Housemate to build an institution for antimagic and raise it high. Gemores far enough away from its former master to be a bit shielded, but Housemate will be defined by its conflict with Giant's Rest. While Nathan mused, the leadership of Housemate started grabbing chairs from inside the mansion and assembling a seating area behind him. Then the heirs entered the courtyard and paused, looking apprehensively at the gathered crowd. Nathan walked over to his friends, speaking quietly. Don't worry about them. They're here to make the whole thing more official. It doesn't change anything for us. I'll give a speech, then Arl and Stella will cut off everybody's arms and cauterize the wounds. I'll talk them through the insight one more time. Kachai will heal everybody who gives up. Clear. Kachai grunted his understanding, jerking his head towards the side. A few housemate leaders came over to socialize with the heirs once it was clear they weren't occupied, and Nathan bustled about to take care of last-minute details. He reassured Heddle, who was almost quivering under the attention of so many people. Shai was the reverse, and seemed to be drinking in the spotlight with a faintly euphoric expression. The others were mostly impassive, seemingly filled with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Eventually, Nathan was satisfied that everything was ready. He stood in front of the line of students and cleared his throat. The council members settled down and paused conversations once they realized he was getting started. As the courtyard went silent, Nathan addressed his students. You all know what's going to happen, and I'm proud that you've pushed yourselves so hard. This is the part we've been preparing for. We will cut off your arms, and you will use the insights behind Regenerate to heal the wound. There's food to help refill your stamina, and a healer who can restore the damage if you cannot. Everybody will leave here unharmed, but it will be bloody and painful before we're done. He paused to meet the eyes of all of his trainees, and they looked back with resolve. Nathan nodded in respect. Hold out your arms, whichever you choose. They did so. Most of the outstretched limbs were steady, though Shams quivered with fear. He's overthinking this, probably caught up in his own head imagining how much this is going to hurt. But he's still following through. Leadership 10 achieved. Let this be the last time that magic harms you, Nathan said in an even voice, gesturing for his friends to commence. Arl, Stella, go ahead. Arl strode down the line with his force-imbued saber, wielding it with the precision of the master he was. He lopped off every outstretched arm 2 inches below the elbow in just a few seconds, finishing the job before the people at the end of the line had time to process the gasps of those at the beginning. Stella followed just behind, holding a jet of intense purple flame. She gently touched it to the stumps, quickly cauterizing each wound. Each of the anti-mage candidates collapsed back into the chairs waiting behind them afterwards. Neither she nor Arl said anything as they returned. There was an air of quiet solemnity to the affair as the students gripped their arms, each reacting to the injury in a different way. Some of them definitely had skills to help manage pain, but not all of them. Nathan waited for Stella and Arl to move to the side before he spoke in a calming voice. Remember my lessons. You have been wounded, and this is not a wound that will heal normally. You must guide your stamina to the wound and direct your body to regrow your arm. Start with the bone where the cells that already divide frequently reside. They are inside the bone, and it is the easiest with them. Focus on growing the bone outwards, past the damage. Your stamina is the fuel and the guidance, but your body knows the plan. You do not need to guide every detail, merely the direction of the healing. He continued speaking in this vein for a little while, reminding his students of his lessons. He told them not to worry about stamina, and to raise their remaining hand if they needed food brought to them. He wasn't surprised that the first one to succeed was Sham. The short and somewhat pudgy kid was smart. He'd understood everything Nathan had said, connecting dots and leaping ahead of the other students. A tendril of flesh extended from his arm, slowly regrowing the limb. Excellent, that proves that this insight is possible for them to learn. Although I have a teaching skill and I think Sham has a learning skill, you don't need a PhD for this insight, though I doubt he got mid-tier regeneration. Good, Nathan said. Don't push it, take your time. This will take a lot of stamina, so keep going slowly. He checked in on the others, repeating the overview of the insight again before trying variations that he thought might work better for different people. Shai was next, gasping as if she'd just been dunked in ice water. Her arm began regrowing, just like Shams had. She looked around victoriously, pleased that she'd been the second one to succeed and checking to ensure everybody had noticed. Not long after there was a small cheer from Sham, quickly silenced in the solemn atmosphere. Nathan followed his gaze to Heddle, whose arm was also regrowing. The quiet, dark-skinned girl relaxed, heaving a gentle sigh as flesh extended from her arm once more. Nathan fetched food from the platters whenever one of his students raised a hand, distributing hearty meat-filled pastries. He'd asked for food that could be eaten with one hand and without a table, and the professional chefs of Housemate had delivered. The 4 remaining students continued straining, and Nathan walked each of them through the concepts once more. One of them gave up after an hour. He looked up at Nathan with angry and pain-filled eyes. "I'm done." Nathan waved Kachi over, and the divine Justicar went to a knee before the burly man. "By my power you are worthy. By the justice of your cause you shall be whole. By the bravery of your sacrifice you are healed." Golden light illuminated the courtyard as the man's arm grew back in seconds. He slumped in the chair, then got up and moved to leave, cradling his arm in a memory of pain. He didn't have to leave, but I guess he feels ashamed. I think calling out to him would only make him feel worse. I'll make sure to have a chat with Oled later. He'll do well under the elites. After that, it wasn't long before the others gave up, one by one signaling Kachai to come heal their arms before they left the courtyard behind in disappointment. The last to give up was Raf, the intense young man staring ahead with gritted teeth. Eventually Nathan knelt down before him, reaching out to gently grab his shoulder. "It's okay. You can still fight for Housemate without anti-magic." Raf nodded, tears in his eyes. He bowed his head, and Kachai healed his arm just like the rest. But he didn't get up, instead holding out his arm and staring intensely at Arl again. "Cut higher up." Kachai rumbled disapprovingly. "I cannot heal you again today." "I won't need it," Raf said through gritted teeth, gesturing sharply for Arl. Nathan frowned down at his student. "Do I let him do it? He's determined and it might work. Different people learn in different ways. If it doesn't work, Kachai can just heal him tomorrow." "Do it," Nathan said, and Arl approached, Stella in tow. They cut and cauterized the wound once more. Raf bent over the arm, staring at the wound like it was the only thing in the world. Nathan knelt next to him. "Talk to me." "What are you thinking?" Raf's voice was low and serious. "That I need to push harder, use the pain. My stamina's in the arm, it's hot, it's ready. I want the arm to grow, and it'll happen if I can focus past the injury. I won't accept failure, not from this wound, not from any wound." "Let's try a different framing. He should still have phantom pain from the arm. Close your eyes," Nathan said confidently. "Concentrate on your body. Can you feel the arm still? Does it hurt?" "Yes," Raf said. "I can feel the hand, but it's not real, it's gone." "Think about the bone, it's hollow. Concentrate your stamina there, make it denser than anything else. That's the power of your body, the fuel for regeneration." Raf's voice was barely a whisper. "It hurts worse than the cut. Shove the pain of the bone out of your body, out the end of your arm. You can still feel your hand, your arm. The stamina mixed with your blood knows the shape of your body. Make it fill in the arm that hurts. Replace pain with stamina." A slow tendril of bone extended from Raf's stump, and he heaved a deep and shuddering breath at the strange sensation. His eyes flickered open, and his head snapped up with a triumphant expression on his wan face. "Congratulations, you have developed the high-tier lecturing utility skill into tutoring." "Utility skill. Tutoring. This skill will help you explain concepts. This effect will be dramatically increased when explaining to a single person, greatly accelerating their learning and deepening their understanding. It will give you a better understanding of what your student understands and what they do not." Nathan grabbed onto Raf as he leapt to his feet, stabilizing him and keeping him from falling over. "Some food here, please." Shai approached and handed over 2 meat pastries. She gently punched Raf in the shoulder, but her voice was relieved. "You made it." The wiry boy was too busy eating to answer. Nathan got up, walking back towards his position in front of the trainees. He met Shy's eyes, tilting his head to indicate she should get back into her position. She hurried to comply. Housemut's leadership had stayed throughout the session, occasionally fidgeting and engaging in low conversation, but they'd been respectful and polite. Now they quieted down and directed their attention back to Nathan. He waited until all of his students were standing in front of him once more, tired from their ordeal but triumphant in their acquisition of the regeneration talent. Nathan met each of their eyes and started the second part of his speech. Being an anti-mage isn't about being powerful. It doesn't let you knock over fortresses or reap foes on a battlefield. In fact, anti-magic makes you less powerful than a normal fighter. He paused, seeing that his students were drinking in his words. Being an anti-mage is about denying somebody else's power. The mages of today can throw fireballs and destroy cities. The mages of the past could topple mountains and bring down the sky. Their smallest leavings threaten everybody. Most of the dangers of Davrar are rooted in magic. He waved his arms around to encompass the world around them. Magic is how the mages control Giant's Rest. They hoard insights and channel their wealth to enchantments that allow each mage to control hundreds or thousands of people. Magic enables power and dominance in a way that other classes do not. Mind magic, flight, invisibility, mass destruction. Each of those things is something that a high-leveled elite can accomplish without magic, if they dedicate their build to it. But a mage can do them all, at half the level. Magic on Davrar is more powerful than any other path, and lends itself to control and domination of those without magic. Even those without the insights of a mage use enchantments, placing those with wealth above those without it. Nathan stabbed his finger towards the line of students waiting in front of him. Equalizing these imbalances is the path of the anti-mage. It is your path to bring down those who rely on magic and wealth. Tear away their advantages and see what they are without them. What's left to a mage when their magic is gone? What power does a warrior have when you break their enchanted blade? The power of their body and the power of their spirit. This is why I pushed you so hard and why you must grow even stronger. You must be tougher than everybody else, more resilient, so that when nobody has any advantages, you will triumph. And with your triumph, you will keep your people safe. I could keep going, but I think I'm going to call it there. The 4 remaining students looked at him with eager eyes, drinking in the speech. Raph looked vindicated, his face intense and expectant. Shy was even more pleased, looking almost blissful at being told she mattered. Hedel was the least responsive, but even the reserved girl seemed moved by Nathan's words. Faint tears glittered in her eyes as she stared at him unblinkingly. Sham just watched Nathan with a wide grin on his face, nodding along with the speech as if he was listening to an interesting lecture. Congratulations, you have developed the leadership, utility skill into inspiration. Utility skill, inspiration. This skill will inspire and motivate those around you. It will encourage them to follow your example and reward them with a measure of your strength and abilities. It will also help you communicate your earnest convictions, and people will naturally look to you as a leader. Now, it is time to grant you anti-magic. Bow your heads and stay calm. Nathan stepped up to Sham and put his hand to the top of the young man's head. He concentrated his aura, purging his student of all mana, even the trace ambient mana of Davrar. He closed his own eyes and focused on his new senses, probing for the latent connection that would allow Sham to develop a mana pool, even if he didn't take a mage class. Artha could cast spells. You get a mage class by having the mana shaping, talent, or something like it, but that insight requires you to shape mana. There must be something there that everybody has. Sham didn't have a pool of mana like he'd felt from mages, but there was still something there, a kind of faint tether that reached across the barrier to that place where mana pools existed. Nathan bored through the barrier with his aura and sliced through the tether, detaching Sham from magic. The wizardry snapped in both directions as if it had been under tension, and Sham jerked in surprise at the sensation. Wizard's intuition too achieved. "Did you get the magic resistance talent?" Nathan asked quietly, removing his hand. Sham nodded, whispering back, "Mid-tier, good. The combination of purging mana from their bodies and severing them from mana is enough." With confirmation that he'd figured it out, Nathan moved down the line. He quickly repeated the action with each of his other students, getting faster each time. Afterwards, he returned to his central position and looked at them. "It's done. Congratulations." There was a faint smattering of applause, and Mila walked up to stand next to Nathan. "Well done. You are the first Antimages of Housemet, and we will bend our efforts to ensure your victory and power. I challenge you to leave a legacy that will continue beyond the ending of history." If I was going to get a third class, I think it would have been right there. The student and scientist classes I turned down at the very beginning must have been too close. Oh well, tutoring is pretty good. Mila turned and beckoned to the rest of the leadership that it was time to leave. "Now, we'll leave your hands free to celebrate. Drinks are on the way." The mayor was as good as her word, and that night Nathan and the heirs partied with the newly minted Antimages. They celebrated the beginning of their paths. Nathan let down his guard for the first time, no longer treating them like students he needed to stay professional around. The heirs spoke to the newly minted Antimages with respect, and he could see the impact it had on their confidence. Nathan and his friends offered lots of advice to the new Antimages. It was less the kind of teaching and training that Nathan had been giving them, and more akin to experienced adventurers telling stories and communicating lessons about when to attack and when to run away. Stella cast a few spells for everybody to play around with their new talent, and they had fun sticking their hands into a magical fire without being harmed. It seemed to grant them all some easy initial rank-ups. Raph started talking to Kachai, and the wolfman seemed to recognize a kindred spirit in the intense young man. Shai spent a good portion of the night flirting with Arl, and Nathan rolled his eyes as they snuck away into the manor to find a bedroom to share. Sarah shook her head and said something biting to Heddle, who covered her mouth with a hand to laugh. Meanwhile, Nathan stayed up late answering questions for Sham, barely restraining himself from mentioning Earth. The short kid was just so curious about everything, and Nathan found himself wanting to talk about things that would blow the younger man's mind. Instead, he glanced around the firelit courtyard, reflecting that this chapter of his life was about to end. He'd have one day to explain anti-magic to his students, and then he'd leave at dawn the next day to go to Giant's Rest. He would be gone, no longer able to help them anymore. At least it seems like they'll have plenty of support from Housemet. I know they'll be doing risky stuff, but if they die it won't be due to a lack of support. I bet Mila will move heaven and earth to keep them alive and leveling. Thank you for listening to the story on KevinAudio.com Chapter 10. A final celebration. Nathan awoke refreshed the next morning, once again thankful that he didn't have to deal with hangovers. Unfortunately, his students didn't have the same capability just yet. They all had low-tier regeneration, and it would be a while before they had the same kind of poison resistance and bodily control Nathan had acquired with Perfected Body. I don't think they'll be able to really follow my path. I think Perfected Body might actually require a graduate-level education. Hopefully, we can work out some other insights for them. He reflected back on something that had been in his mind since yesterday's ceremony. Mila was trying to set up the Antimages as a self-sustaining organization. After all, they had seen that an Antimage could make another Antimage, and Nathan had already known they would try to propagate the ability when he'd passed it on. The problem was that it required a sufficiently powerful Antimage, one with a talent that could extend outside of their body and neutralize the magic in another person. It was possible that one of Nathan's students would become powerful enough for that, but it wasn't going to happen anytime soon, especially if it required interacting with wizardry to fully pull off. The same was true for the regeneration insight. Nathan's students understood enough to gain the talent themselves, but he would be surprised if they could teach it effectively. He had a teaching skill and had personalized his lessons for each student. You had to understand something very well in order to teach someone else. That's part of why a lot of teachers suck. Sham might be able to get there, but not easily. A whole military with regeneration would be a great way to keep people alive. I wish them luck, but I haven't committed to helping more than I already have. Other shit to deal with like Giant's Rest. And the endings. Nathan walked around the manor, noting the heavy rain cascading down outside. It felt like it should be a lazy day, but he was tense with the knowledge that he was leaving tomorrow. He woke up the 4 new antimages and directed them to meet him in a central sitting room in the empty mansion. He made sure to give Shai plenty of warning, hoping Arl had already left so he wouldn't have to deal with any awkwardness. But when he first knocked on the door, Arl popped out of the sumptuous bedroom Shai had chosen with a cheerful grin. He tapped Nathan on the shoulder. "May the light shine in your eyes. I must hurry to meet the Guardians for our planned hunt." Nathan just sighed. "Get out of here. I'll see you for dinner. Let Kia know I'll come by this afternoon. She needs to teach me aura control." Arl gave a jaunty wave as he vanished around a corner. Shai came out a moment later, giving Nathan a challenging glare. He didn't say anything, just beckoned her to the lounge. There they met Heddle, Sham, and Raf. The 4 of them ate a quick breakfast of food left over from the previous day, then Nathan got started on his last day of teaching. "Congratulations again on your success. I'm leaving tomorrow morning, so we've only got one day. There's a lot of ground to cover. I want to describe some more details about regeneration to help with your next development. Then I'll talk about how to effectively use anti-magic, especially against monsters. But I will also answer questions and help in other ways if I can. I have followed one path, but there is more than one way to be an anti-mage. For example, I developed my anti-magic to absorb mana and convert it into stamina. That requires a very comprehensive understanding of mana and several skills that would be more common on a mage. But I think I could have also tried to increase my control over my anti-magic, so I could have wielded enchanted weapons without breaking them. He knocked his knuckles on the fine wooden table. Or I could have attempted to incorporate my anti-magic into weapons, from swords to bows. I want to hear your ideas and brainstorm insights that might lead to further developments in classes. I'll be happy to provide supporting insights and skills that might help." Sham was first out of the gate, a question ready. "I ask about using the regeneration insight to heal others. The stamina is mine, but there's a worker insight to transfer stamina that could be used." They talked for the entire day. The new anti-mages eager to learn things that would help them survive and better protect housemate. They also seemed to be ready to explore their own ideas, now that they had gained the 2 critical talents. Tutoring 2 achieved. Then it was time for farewells. Nathan wore a satisfied smile as he shook everybody's hands. "Good luck to you all. Level don't die, and I hope to see you again soon." Heddle pulled her eyes up to meet his. "Thank you." Nathan approached the room he'd been directed to when he asked for Kia. It was one of the fancier rooms in the governmental mansion. It seemed like Housemate was trying to woo the elite adventurers of Gemor when they visited. Probably in the hope that they'd decide to stay longer and maybe help out with all of the problems of the newly liberated city. Maybe Miela's hoping they'll move in. It's what I'd do. But after seeing the Caxal estate back in Gemor, I doubt it. He knocked on the door, not feeling the enchantment that Dalo usually cast to prevent eavesdropping. The door was yanked open a moment later and Kia stood beyond. "Good, you're here. I grabbed extra bottles of Umna." She jerked her head, and Nathan entered the room behind the tall, gorgeous woman. She wasn't wearing much armor, and the padded undershirt did little to disguise her heroically toned body. Once again, Nathan was struck by how much Kia's path had perfected her. It had shaped her into a tall Valkyrie of a woman, in both body and personality. There was nobody else in the room, and Kia pulled out a flask of the purple liquor they both enjoyed and poured 2 glasses. I am filled with regret for the obstacles I put in your path after the battle. I forced your development, and for that I am sorry. But you would do it again, Nathan said as he took the offered cup. His tone wasn't entirely polite. She threw back the glass with relish and looked at him over the empty cup. I would. My path is narrow, but it is not why I acted as I did. Her lips pulled back from her teeth, showing an even row of shiny teeth. People deserve a chance to change if it can be granted. Feline kills for vengeance, not because it is righteous. The final word held an entire philosophy's worth of meaning. Nathan decided to change the subject before they started talking about morality again. Where is everybody? I'm leaving tomorrow morning and hope to see them again. Kia gave a small smile and tilted her head, seeming to consider how to respond. She gestured him to a seat and sat herself. They are delivering our kill to the kitchens, then touring the city. I have heard you desire a specific insight. I will teach you before they return. Yeah, Koch, I mentioned you knew something like aura manipulation, but you don't have an aura. How did you learn it? Kia's gaze went distant. When I was young, I found one of the most valuable treasures of Davrar. She frowned, eyes troubled as she called up unpleasant memories. Knowledge. It was an ancient stash of books, held in stasis by powerful magic. Her lips twisted, with many powerful insights clearly written on their pages. She's been sitting on a trove of insights and hasn't passed them on. She could have saved people with that knowledge. Nathan didn't say anything, but Kia picked up on his disapproval and explained carefully. They were stored away during the ending of Deicide. There was a note, an explanation that many were attempting to destroy all traces of this knowledge. Reading the tales within, I believe that the gods were once a force of balance and civilization on Davrar. They were a path to power that safeguarded people through 4 endings. But it is as clear as polished gems that the ending of Deicide made them into malevolent tyrants, a Davrar-born force of domination and control. She swirled her glass, breaking eye contact and speaking softly. The ending of Deicide was the rebellion of mortals against the gods, and the subsequent divine retribution. The books were hidden by some of the last faithful worshippers before they were wiped out. They hoped that the insights would rekindle worship and bring about the rebirth of the gods. The last sentence was spoken in barely a whisper, and it hung in the air for a moment. Kia's expression was downcast, and she looked up with a haunted air. Worship of divinity is corruptive. You come to embody your god's ethos. Once you begin the path of worship, the powers you receive change you. I feared I would bring the ending of history by reviving old terrors. I now consider the books as dangerous as any dungeon, and the insights of worship as terrible curses. The warrior woman snorted and drained her glass. I did not trust any others, so I did not share the insights. But as a fool in her first dungeon, I trusted myself and chose who I believed was the safest god to worship, Damon, the god of righteous battle. She shook her head in mild disgust as she poured more. I was lucky. Damon's power can be used, as you have seen, but if even the barest speck of the god's mind had survived the ending, I would have been doomed. I could have granted him that agency if I had chosen to dedicate myself to him fully, but instead I chose to take the mantle of the divine, to cut away a part of the deity's power for myself. Kia was silent for a second, but Nathan didn't jump in. He wanted to ask questions, but it didn't seem like she was done. I was lucky, she repeated. It was not a path I knew was present. I should have burned the books and cast myself into Firewatch Peak for reading them. But Davrar rewards risk, and I found another path. I know that this power has changed me, but I am comfortable with it. Instead of bringing back the gods, I have weakened one of them by stealing his power. Those who follow my path will do the same, until the gods no longer pose a threat to Davrar." She shrugged. "And now I have the wisdom to share some insights detached from the greater whole of the path of worship. I will describe divine aura manipulation to you, though I believe that the base insights will work for other auras." Nathan held up a hand. "Hang on, I want to go back and hear about the ending of Deicide. What caused it? How long did it last? How did it end?" "The details are not clear," Kia said with a frown. Most of the books were from before the ending, and contained histories and scriptures that praised the glorious mastery of the gods over Davrar. The books describing the ending were so full of propaganda as to be useless, decrying the faithless mortals and questers who rose against their benevolent overlords. She shook her head with exasperation. Muckgrabber assholes, those writers. So far in the grip of the divine, they could conceive no other view than that of their gods. Doesn't sound much like the ending of Elements, where elemental storms ravaged the surface for decades. This sounds like an apocalyptic war between gods and their worshippers. Nathan frowned, thinking back on his other sources of knowledge about the death of the gods. From what Brock said, it seems like most of the questers were fighting against the gods, but that could have just been him and his allies. Badad killed Brox with an amulet that cast Quenfi's hatred, but it shattered. Quenfi was a god that Brox boasted about killing. I wonder what the history of that item was. Was it from before the ending of Deicide? Did Badad fight on the side of the gods? Nathan shrugged. There was no way for him to know unless he could get Badad talking about it. He stopped ruminating and looked back to Kia. "Thanks. I know which skill I want to drop. Should I do that now?" She nodded. "Yes. I have few doubts that you can learn this skill. The only question is the tier." Nathan had never gotten rid of a skill before, but so far Davrar had been pretty easy to work with. He focused on the skill he wanted gone, willing quiet movement away. After a moment of concentration, a prompt appeared. "Do you wish to lose the low-tier quiet movement utility skill? This is a permanent decision, and you will be unable to reverse it. You will be able to regain the skill, but you will lose all ranks, and the tier will depend on the quality of the insight used to gain the skill." Nathan confirmed his choice. Low-tier quiet movement utility skill lost. He looked back at Kia. "Okay, all set," she grunted in acknowledgement. "You can shape your aura, move it around, make it more concentrated, yes. Then start by forming a spiral." The next half hour was spent by Kia walking Nathan through a pattern of exercises where he formed complex patterns with his aura and focused on making the edges defined. There was supposed to be a clear line from where his aura started and ended, instead of a gradient. It seemed like the trick was to make his available aura have the largest possible defined surface area. If this isn't something she uses, then she's gotta have a memory skill. Or maybe she just looked it up when she learned I wanted it. Pending utility skill, mid-tier aura manipulation. You have trained for fine control of your aura. This skill will make it easier to manipulate your aura, including precisely controlling the shape and density. Will not increase the size of your aura at all. Yup, that does what I want. Congratulations, you have accepted the mid-tier aura manipulation utility skill. He relaxed and raised his glass to Kia. "Success," she smiled wide, the expression dazzling. "A prophecy of victory. We may now proceed to further exercises. Begin by making a spiral with your aura." Aura manipulation 2 achieved. Another half hour later, Nathan blew out a breath and rubbed his forehead. "Okay, I got a rank up. Not easy to do out of combat." Kia drained her latest glass of liquor. "True aim. If you master those exercises, you may earn another rank or two. Further advances will require danger." She reached forward to pour another glass, finishing the bottle. They'd both been drinking like fish, but neither showed any signs of drunkenness. It was almost a waste of alcohol, but both of them enjoyed the taste and Kia didn't seem bothered by the expense. The Amazonian woman leaned back in her chair and tapped something at her hip. I sent a notice that we're done. They should be here soon for the celebration. She pulled out a few more bottles of various kinds of alcohol and set them down on the table. What are we celebrating? Nathan asked, curious. Kia gave a sharp and disbelieving laugh. What else? The defeat of an army of giants rest and the impossible truth that we all survived. Gemor lives and Halsmit will remain free. Some adventurers died, but that is our fate. The villages are safe, she smirked. Safer than before, now that Halsmit is no longer a haven and base for enslavement mages. Then the door popped open, and Nathan's friends entered bearing food. An enormous amount of food. Arl and Sarah carried between them a wide platter loaded with a giant stack of steaks that looked like they'd come off the ribs of a cow the size of a semi-truck. Stella and Katja carried further plates holding vegetables and sides, but the focal point of the meal was definitely the steaks. Castlebear, he asked, watching as his friends placed the food onto a table. Castlebear, Stanel said excitedly as he pranced through the door, carrying a couple bowls of sauce. Hear me, but I've been looking forward to this. We killed off the last one around Gemor a decade ago. The rest of the Guardians entered, and they set to eating and talking with gusto. It was a good time, and everybody made efforts to avoid talking about the more serious things that were upcoming. Nobody had an agenda, they were just trying to enjoy each other's company, and the delicious food before them. Apparently Castlebear was hard to prepare properly, requiring multiple steps to make the meat safe for consumption. But done properly, it was amazing. Nathan used perfected body to accelerate his metabolism, breaking down the food quickly so he could keep eating. The steak tasted a lot like a good cut of beef, but a bit denser and infused with an herbal tang. The conversation was mostly light, split between gossip about Gemor adventurer politics and discussion of Halsmit's developing culture and economy. The Adventurers Guild was undergoing a pretty major political shift with the death of Khazar, the leader of the traditionalist faction of adventurers. I'm really not sad about that. He was a jerk. But he was somebody the archmages were wary of, so in the strategic sense it's not great that he's dead. The overwhelming victory against the Giants' Rest army had also changed the attitude inside Gemor. The dangers of Davrar abounded, but with Agman chastened on one front and Giants' Rest defeated on the other, it felt like Gemor was secure from organized aggression for the first time in its history. Sudriel was working up another adventurer training course, recruiting heavily from the villages, and trying to find adventurers who were interested in mentoring new trainees. The Guardians were pretty sure she was up to something beyond that, and Nathan considered telling them about the Adventurer Archive. But the Guildmistress had asked that he let her manage the reveal herself, so he held back the information, even if he wanted to see the Guardians' surprise at the official version of what he'd proposed to them earlier. "What of the antimages you've been training?" Stanel asked. "Pardon my axe, but some of the people I trained spoke as if they were a prophecy of safety." Nathan frowned. "There are only 4 of them, but they've got regeneration and magic resistance, which is all I could give them in the time I had. I hope they'll do well. Mila wants to make them into an institution, so I bet she'll ask me to give antimagic to more later on, or push my students to develop their antimagic so they can make more themselves." "Waking giants," Dalo said with exasperation. "An organization of antimages, not even as a game." Nathan rolled his eyes at the white-bearded man. "I think you mages have had it too good for too long. There needs to be some way to challenge an archmage without another archmage. Now there is." Kullo gave her husband a fond smile, then turned to the other heirs. "Have you met the new antimages? What do your bones say?" "They have the spark," Katja said. "Nathan trained them well and they will become great or die in the attempt." "I like shy," Arl said, his gaze introspective. Sarah elbowed him. "Of course you do, you horny goat." Then she seemed to remember that her father was present and winced, shooting Arl an apologetic look. He blushed deeply at the sudden interest from Stanel looking down. "Yes, but she has fire and a deep humor that he looked up and shrugged helplessly, that I like. Good that we're planning to stay in Housemate a while longer," Stella said ruthlessly. "Arl can stay near his harem." He glowered at her and pretended to ignore his father's expression, but didn't dispute the point. "You do mean to stay in Housemate?" Kia asked, her voice not betraying any opinion. "Yes," Kachai responded, folding his arms and meeting his mother's eyes challengingly. "Jemor is steady. Housemate needs help, much of it. We freed this city and I would see it survive. Few of the adventurers are staying and Housemate needs all the hands that will help. It's also the only ending's damned way to keep up with Nathan's levels," Arl quipped. "When he comes back from Giant's Rest, he's going to be blasphemously strong. We need challenges and there are more targets here." "I'm glad to hear it," Nathan said lightly. "If I do manage to bring Giant's Rest down, I'll want Housemate to help with the fallout." He snorted in amusement. "I hope Mila's ambitious because I might just dump an entire empire into her lap. I certainly don't want to try to run the place." He looked around at the other heirs. "I like Mila, but I haven't worked with her too much. After all of this, let me know if you think I can trust her with that kind of responsibility." The other heirs looked surprised at Nathan's comment, but Kia gave him a nod of approval. Cullel changed the subject, asking about how he trained and selected his antimages. Nathan described each of the four before describing the ways he'd taught his students, and how his focus had been to weed out anybody who wasn't committed. His descriptions got Kia and Stanel interested, and they probed for knowledge from Earth on the subject of training. Nathan had some training in pedagogy from his time as a grad student, and he certainly had some examples to not follow. But what he'd run the antimage students through was more like a boot camp, and he was well aware his knowledge there was barely surface level, taken from a few books like Starship Troopers and war movies, but they wanted to hear what he had to say. Jemor's primary method of instruction was apprenticeships, and even the adventurer training course was a departure from anything they'd done before. By this point they were finishing up dessert and on after-dinner drinks when Cullel coughed and stood up. "Well, we should depart and give our heirs some time to talk." The older foxfolk woman turned to Nathan and held her arms wide. "May your future be a prophecy of victory." "Thanks, Cullel," Nathan said as he walked over and hugged the gray-furred woman. He turned and shook hands with the rest of the guardians, giving each of them a quick farewell. Last was Kia. "Hold yourself to the path you wish to walk." Her face was confident without a speck of doubt. Then she was gone and Nathan was alone with the heirs. Chapter 11. A Giant's Grave. Nathan looked around at his friends, trying to figure out how to say goodbye. His eyes passed over each of them before he spoke. "We've been talking about this for such a long time. It's hard to believe it's finally here. What more is there to say? I'm going to do something that I need to do, and I'll try to come back sooner rather than later." "It always seemed an uncertain prophecy," Arl said. He reached across the table and clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "Drip blood in their eyes and then come back so we can challenge the endings together. We'll wait." His smile grew crooked. "But not forever. If you take too long, we'll kill that problem without you." Sarah's lips were pressed tightly together, her expression troubled. "We'll need to level fast. You're not even at 243 yet." She flicked her brother in the side of the head and he winced. She turned to Nathan. "Don't bait the castle bear." She paused, then snorted in amusement. "Ah, that's a prophecy of fools. We all know you'll walk up and punch the giant in the balls. Don't die and we'll swap deeds when you return." Nathan nodded to the twins, heartened by their humor. "Good luck. I'll try to bring back another legendary weapon or two for Arl, since he seems to need the help." The master of many weapons groaned dramatically, but he smiled and made a grasping gesture as if reaching for what Nathan had promised. Nathan turned to Sarah. You can trade against my favors with the bows for another rifle of your own design. I figure you might have some new modifications in mind now that you're a higher level." The sniper thought about it for a moment before she shrugged. "If we have the time to return to Gemor, I may do that. I hear that Beatrid has a much larger shop now and many apprentices." Nathan turned to Stella next. "I look forward to seeing whatever new magic you pick up with your new class. I'll probably have some new abilities when I come back. Try not to blow up any mountains unless they really need to get blown up." The red-haired mage was subdued, but she sniffed haughtily at his words. "I'll be a blasphemous force of destruction. When you return, I'll be able to slag a desert without your insights of endings." Her mouth quirked into a small grin. "Then when we need to destroy the next army, it won't be a problem. And when we need to blow up the sun, we can join our insights to get it done." Nathan couldn't help laughing at her words. Maybe blowing up the sun would fix the problem of the endings, given what he'd seen on the solstice. "I look forward to seeing it. Good luck." Finally he glanced at Katja, whose face was trapped in a complicated expression. "I think he's going to try the divine blessing thing again, but I'm not sure that's a good idea." Sure enough, when Katja spoke, his voice reverberated in the small room. "You leave to fight your own battle with a truly righteous goal." The wolfman's voice bore a rhythmic cadence, similar to the previous times he'd invoked the divine. "Your path diverges from ours, and you journey to a place we cannot follow." The speech wasn't loud, but the reverberation effect Nathan had noticed before was accomplished by traces of wizardry that flowed out of Davrar, responding to Kachai's words and releasing divine mana in response. Kachai was channeling divine mana to stimulate the ritual, but he wasn't manipulating the wizardry directly. It was more like Davrar itself was casting the spell in response to the ritual. The wizardry and excess divine mana were being summoned in response to his call, guided by the wizardry that responded to his words. "The heart of Giant's Rest is not our path, but it is yours, and I charge you to walk it well. May your flame grant you the power you need to cast down the Ascendant Academy in righteous battle." The power around them swelled, though not as dramatically as when Katja had blessed Brox and the heirs before the battle. Nathan could feel the vortex of power spinning around them, waiting for his response before it would act. The wizardry was dormant but ready, eagerly expecting the next stage of the ritual. It liked the narrative that Katja was setting up and wanted Nathan to complete it. "Why am I giving the wizardry agency here?" Badud's wizardry didn't feel like it had emotions. "Is it something to do with divine mana?" He bowed his head to Katja and answered seriously. "I will challenge Giant's Rest with righteousness in my heart and carry your blessing to the death of a quester." Wizard's Intuition 3 achieved. It was the right thing to say, and Katja's eyes flashed brighter with familiar divine fire as the mana responded to their words, flaring high enough that the very air glowed with golden luminescence. But they weren't done yet, and the flaming orbs in Katja's face bored into Nathan. "Do not forget your path with us. We swore an oath together on the solstice, atop the seal. We swore to protect not just Gemor but all of Davrar. Your enemy is not just Giant's Rest but the endings themselves." His next words weren't so much a blessing as a plea. "Come back to us that we might fight the greater battle together." Nathan's voice was similarly quiet, but the vow he made was no less serious. "I will." The magic in the air around them thrummed with the words, shifting in some profound way. It went from the frenetic energy of impending battle, the rah-rah of adrenaline and the fight, to the comforting certainty of having friends at your side through terrible danger. Kachai's voice was stronger now, but still bore a faint echo. "Then by our destiny, go forth and defeat this foe before we move on to greater things." The wizardry took that as the prompt, and the magic swirled around Nathan, converging on him. He tried to pull in his anti-magic tight to avoid interfering with the blessing, clenching down on his newly expanded aura. Mid-tier aura manipulation 3 achieved. It wasn't enough. The divine mana lost cohesion as it flowed into Nathan, giving him a dramatic stamina boost but having no other effect. The wizardry followed, attempting to settle in Nathan's bones and graft its power into him. It would have contained the divine mana, storing it for future use like an artificial mana pool. Nathan guessed that it would be used to protect him from hostile mental effects, empower his movements and heal him when he was injured. But the construct fragmented and broke against Nathan's aura, dissolving away into motes of power that were subsumed into his anti-magic. He tried to clutch at the power to bring it back, but the structure was gone for good. Nathan flexed his hand, examining his body and finding no trace of the blessing Kacha had tried to bestow upon him. It brought him back to the battle when he'd been left out of the blessing that had empowered Brox and the heirs. He'd felt like an outsider in that moment, deprived of a special connection with his friends. Anti-magic has its drawbacks. There are some things I can't share with the heirs, and now I'm leaving, widening that gap even further. Nathan let out a slow breath, opening his eyes to smile sadly at Kacha. "Thank you." The wolfman bowed his head in defeat, then stepped forward to clasp Nathan's hands. "If you cannot carry my blessing, know that you have my hopes." That night, Nathan couldn't sleep. He lay awake, agonized by doubt over his decision to go to Giant's Rest. There was so much to do here in Housemint. He could keep adventuring with the heirs, train his students, protect people and live comfortably. But he was planning on leaving all of that behind. Tomorrow he'd go into enemy territory. He'd sneak into Giant's Rest with Phelan and try to topple it from the inside. It was a monumental task, one that could very well get him killed. Why am I doing this? Is vengeance still driving me forward? I've had time and distance from those first days when Tial tried to subjugate me to make me into a thing. I killed Tial with my own hands. Isn't that vengeance enough? Why am I still dedicating myself to taking down Giant's Rest? He rolled over in bed, remembering the past. His first days on Davrar had been confusing and terrifying, and he'd come out of his captivity with a deep revulsion for Giant's Rest and a strong desire to take revenge for what they'd cost him. Giant's Rest is the reason my path is to break magic, instead of learning it myself. If they weren't such assholes, I could have worked with them, translated my knowledge to make Davrar a better place. But the choice was to embrace anti-magic, become a mage of Giant's Rest, or become a slave. I hated Tial, but I also hate the system that made him, that will continue to make more like him. Nathan sighed, thinking about how that motivation had led him to where he was now, falling asleep in a liberated Housemint. Every step along the way had seemed reasonable, but it had mostly been reactive. He'd come to Housemint because the heirs had been kidnapped, then liberated the city because it had been the better option than running away. But now he was taking the initiative. He was going to Giant's Rest to murder mages and destabilize the slave empire. If he succeeded, a lot of people were going to die as the mages fought each other and monsters preyed on the undefended. Why was he doing it? Was it for revenge, or was it because he'd objectively evaluated Giant's Rest as an evil that needed to be purged? Does it matter? I think Davrar would be better off without Giant's Rest on it. But it's also a personal issue for me because of what happened. They're my enemies. Opposing magic is my path, and going to Giant's Rest will make me powerful faster than anything else if I survive. He snorted softly. If he ever wanted to challenge the endings, he'd need that power. If he settled for a comfortable life, he'd never fulfill the oath he'd sworn on the solstice. Toppling Giant's Rest is the next thing I need to do. I won't spill lakes of blood or murder innocents to take them down, but I will give it my best shot. After that comes the endings. Nathan awoke early the next morning, grabbing a quick breakfast in the kitchens and packing a small bag with supplies and food. Thus far, he depended on the heirs to carry all of his gear in dimensional bags, but he wouldn't have that option anymore. He found Feline waiting for him in the square as the sun ignited, sitting on the stage where the mages of Housemit had been overwhelmed by the adventurers and freed elites. She waved at him as he approached, hopping off the stone platform and walking towards the eastern gate without waiting for him to catch up. Nathan hurried forward, falling in beside the assassin as she strode through the waking city. His attention was drawn to the crowds of people getting started with the day, and Nathan noted the differences from the first time he'd walked through these streets at Phelan's side. There was actual conversation now, with people chatting and complaining. Messengers and porters moved through the street, yelling and joking with each other as they ran early deliveries. The traffic got out of Nathan and Phelan's way like it had before, but it seemed to be out of a genuine desire not to delay their business, instead of a fear of being noticed and punished for bothering a mage. The two didn't say anything to each other until they'd passed all the way through the city, at which point Phelan leaned back and stretched, thrusting her chest forward and going up on her toes slightly. Afterwards she turned to Nathan with a sly smile. "Hear me, I hoped this would be your path when first I found you in the Adventurers Guild." She gestured back towards the city. "I did not prophesize the liberation of a city, but it is a powerful start. It will enable our strategy in Giant's Rest. Listen to my words, for I have considered how we shall strike the target. Follow me." They started at a mild run down the road towards Giant's Rest, and Nathan felt Phelan's stealth skills envelop him through his noticeability. There'd been a dozen eyes on them from the city, but any curious onlookers drifted away as the pair set off along the road. Phelan filled Nathan in on the brutal politics of the slave empire as they traveled. Giant's Rest didn't really have a government. It was more of an administrative council of archmages that ran the Ascendant Academy at the heart of the city. They funded a force of guards for Giant's Rest itself and set rules that sounded more like guidelines. The cultural norms were the real rules. The enforcement of those rules wasn't the responsibility of the Ascendant Council or even the guards. Instead, it was considered a civic duty for mages to punish transgressions, and it wasn't uncommon for somebody without allies to be accused of an imaginary offense, be challenged to a duel, and then have their wealth confiscated as punishment. It was taboo for a mage to kill or mind control another mage outside of unusual circumstances, but lower-level conflict led to a sprawling web of alliances and feuds that spanned from students to archmages. All that being said, the system worked well to encourage people to generate wealth and develop their own personal power, and that of their allies. To be worth anything in Giant's Rest, you needed to be rich enough to hire mages to work for you, powerful enough to deter challengers, and connected enough to have allies that would help you if another group came after you. Each of the offshoot towns and cities of Giant's Rest were effectively owned by a different mage or archmage, who was in charge of the defense of the territory. Other mages who wanted to live or do business in those territories had to pay rent, and were usually allies or vassals of the one who owned the territory. It was common for the majority of slaves to belong to the ruler of a city, who also ran most of the important businesses. The lucrative industries were considered prizes, often distributed to allies and vassals. In general, slaves were bundled with real estate as a single unit, and part of building a new business or venture was purchasing or capturing the labor to work it. But Giant's Rest itself was the crown jewel of the slave empire. It was larger, richer, and the focus of all of the status games. A promising mage could build a prosperous city up from nothing, but without allies in the capital, it would be quickly taken from them by a more powerful mage. And those allies would expect payment in service, money, slaves, or insights. The entire edifice was a pyramid with the Ascendant Council at the top, almost 24 archmages that each had their own supporters, vassals, and protégés. Then those people had another layer below them, and down it went until they reached the mages at the bottom of the hierarchy, the students of the Ascendant Academy without resources or power of their own. TL was powerful enough at magic that nobody could dismiss him, but he wasn't good at the political game. He didn't have the support network of people below him to fund his projects, and he probably owed Exia a favor for staying in Housemate when he was trying to capture me. Ultimately, he was only an archmage in terms of magical power, not political power or the ability to command large numbers of mages. After she'd concluded the summary, Phelan laid out their goal. Our target is to disrupt Giant's Rest, set a spark to the tension between mages, preventing them from striking against Housemate or Gemor because they are too busy settling feuds with each other. There are too many mages for us to kill, so they must kill each other. Her mouth twisted like she'd bitten something sour. I know exactly where to strike, what I would do if this were not a time of ascension. But now they follow Badud. They call him a founder, one who established the Ascendant Academy after the ending of Elements. He leads the council and will quell dissent if he is able. Her brow furrowed as she considered the problem. We should strike at his enemies, then his allies. If we cause smoke and blood at an event with representatives from both sides, that may be enough to force conflict. We must hit that target before he is recovered. She sighed heavily, pulling out a knife from her sleeves and spinning it through her knuckles. It seemed like a nervous tick. But who are his enemies? What are his goals? Now that he is defeated once, is his priority to see the destruction of Gemor and Housemate? Or will he rebuild Giant's Rest armies first? She shook her head. Not understanding the enemy is a prophecy of defeat. Nathan frowned, thinking back on what Badud had said when he'd kidnapped the heirs. He wants Giant's Rest united, efficient, and growing. He wants them to take over the continent quickly, with as little of his attention as possible. Phelan hummed slightly as they continued down the road, considering the implications of that. She started thinking out loud. If we'd left yesterday, we would have time to scout out the city, gathering information. But since we have given our enemies time, she shot a moderately annoyed glance in his direction. We must strike the very day we enter the city. Tonight. Are we going directly there? Nathan asked, gesturing at the paved road underneath them that led straight to Giant's Rest. I would think that they're watching this route and we'd have to take a detour. With my skills? No, Phelan said shortly. It is not a risk I would normally embrace, but I have an edge against magical dangers on this journey. She reached over and patted his shoulder fondly. Nathan pursed his lips but didn't respond, and they lapsed into silence as they ran through the mountainous terrain. The site of the battle came up soon enough, several days old now. There was still wreckage of the Giant's Rest camp everywhere, the ground carved and the vegetation broken from the spontaneous flood. All of the bodies were gone, either removed by the victorious forces from Gemor and Housemate or eaten by monsters. It wasn't even midday, but Nathan found the stillness of the place unsettling. He could clearly remember the extent of the army's camp, and the experience of fighting in the sky above as hundreds of mages barraged him with spells. Revisiting the place and finding it so silent was spooky. I wonder if I could just airwalk up to get the same view, see what's changed since the battle. But I need to conserve my stamina. Stella's not around to recharge me anymore, and here in the wilderness I need food and rest to get it back. With my expanded pool, it would take days of good eating and quality rest to completely fill the tank. He was on the lookout for monsters and spotted a pseudoworm rooting through some tents that had been caught in a few bushes. The long lizard looked like a huge, elongated Gila monster with extra legs, and it undulated as its claws shredded the enchanted fabric to expose what lay hidden beneath. It found a wooden drawer unit, which it promptly swallowed whole. The monster sniffed the air and looked around, causing Nathan to tense. It wasn't a particularly dangerous monster, but it was one that neither he nor Feline were well suited to fight. Feline's daggers were too small to inflict the damage needed to kill the large monster, and while Nathan was strong, there was only so much bare hands could do to a creature that outmassed a polar bear. But Feline showed no concern, and it turned out to be justified as the monster loped off to another pile of debris to pillage. They passed through the battlefield, continuing their run. They were less than halfway to Giant's Rest, but the mountains flew by at their pace. It had taken the army days to travel this distance, but two unencumbered and high-level adventurers could cover the distance in a day. Feline seemed to be having a slightly harder time than Nathan, even though he was trying not to spend any stamina. This is much calmer than the run to Halsmith after the heirs were kidnapped. My movement skills are more powerful now. The terrain grew gentler and greener as they approached Giant's Rest, the mountains smoothing out into hills that were spaced farther apart. At a few points, Nathan had to disable magical sensors for them to pass. He also spotted illusions that hid various watchers, but left them alone at Feline's order. They were running in the open down the road, but nobody seemed to see them, an impression backed up by his noticeability skill. Feline's skills really seem to make anyone watching temporarily forget they have eyes. His companion broke the silence, speaking slowly to explain the plan she'd been mulling over. We should strike at the hedonists. They're a group of artisan and enslavement mages who create specialty enchanted items and carefully breed slaves according to the tastes of the buyer. They're not powerful or disciplined, but they're friendly with all the other factions and careful to curry favor with anybody who could threaten them. She nodded decisively, warming up to the idea. I have ignored them because they do not push for attacks against Gemor. They also can mostly afford wards to the adamant standard, and that is a target I cannot hit. But they are visible, and an invitation to their parties is worth the giant's favor. If we strike them, it will cause confusion and open up further possibilities. Nathan frowned, asking a question that had been bugging him. Isn't Badud our priority? Shouldn't we go straight for him? Feline chuckled, looking at the terrain around them. Hold your words for a moment, and you will see. A minute later, they came around a tall hill, and Feline gestured as the city of Giant's Rest was revealed. What first grabbed his attention were the towers. The Ascendant Academy dominated the skyline like an organ sized for a god. The cluster of golden skyscrapers could be mistaken for a lone mountain standing out from the rolling grassland, with multiple tall pinnacles stretching high into the sky in a way that reminded Nathan of cathedral spires. Except the building was the size of a geological feature, and it was surrounded by a haze that glowed with magical light. The magic created a halo effect around the structure, like something from Christian religious iconography. Orbs of multicolored light stood above the various spires, and streamers of color framed each tower. The whole edifice shone, glorying in the light and splendor of powerful magic. Nathan was stunned into immobility by the majesty of the structure. But then he thought at what lay under that beautiful exterior. I understand why it's the center of Giant's Rest, the symbol of their power. It's a wonder of Davrar, but I'll bring it down if that's what's needed. Chapter 12. Into the giant's maw. Feline pointed up at the highest tower with a colored nail, indicating the very peak of the Ascendant Academy. That is where Badud is. It is not a place we can reach. Nathan tilted his head back to look up at the central tower. It skewered the sky, surrounded by its shorter piers. Without a frame of reference, it was hard to tell if it was as tall as a skyscraper or a mountain. We cannot enter the academy, Feline said with an air of old frustration. Magic beyond mana bars those who should not be there, and ancient golems stalk the passages. The graduates speak of shifting walls and stairs that move to facilitate access only to those acknowledged by the academy. Students may only reach a certain height, and the tallest towers are restricted to the archmages and their slaves. She chewed on her lips, sharpened teeth standing out against pink flesh. No assassins have returned from entering the academy. We cause problems in the city, then strike those who leave the building to enforce their will. Badud and the archmages are unassailable in his stronghold. Damn, that's not great to hear. It's probably enchanted with powerful wizardry. It also sounds like the building itself might have some degree of intelligence. I need to be careful about that. I'm mildly regretting not taking anti-wizard. If I want to infiltrate the academy, I'm going to need to learn everything I can about Giant's Rest and rank up my stealth skills. His brows drew together, thinking about the obstacle posed by the Giant Academy. If it's so protected, why don't all of the mages live there? It looks big enough. Access to the academy is a privilege, Feline replied. Mages learn there, train there, but the graduates are pushed out to grow the empire. Only archmages and teachers may live within the academy. The lecturers are marked with orange robes, and that status is sought by many who enjoy the safety and luxury of the academy as a student. Most archmages have rooms in the towers but maintain compounds in the city, where their households live. But some of the lecturers have not left since they first entered. They are the heart of Giant's Rest in a way, teaching the insights of magic to all new mages. Her attention dropped down to the city that sprawled underneath the massive edifice of the academy. Our target is there. The academy is closed to us, but the city holds many foes. It's also much easier to hide in. Nathan almost hadn't noticed the city underneath the towering structure, but 3- and 4-story buildings stretched for miles across the rolling hills, illuminated as much by the glowing magic of the academy as by the sun. Nathan caught glimpses of parks and walled compounds interspersed throughout the city. The entire city was huge, many times larger than Housemint, though still only a tenth of the size of Old Gemor. But that's essentially the comparison between Paris and Tokyo. It's still hundreds of thousands of people. Who am I to look at that and think I'll be able to challenge it? I decided to take down Giant's Rest after Tial tried to subjugate me. But how do we do it, short of teaching Stella the nuke spell? Nathan frowned at that line of thought, and his attention landed on the gates that were their next obstacle. High walls stretched around the city, built from a light stone and studded with tall towers. The towers were squat constructions and clearly magical, each surrounded by an aura of enchantment that betrayed powerful weapons. This place would be a nightmare to attack conventionally. The gates were spaced frequently, giving access to rings of rich farmland that stretched out in all directions. There was a short killing field directly in front of the wall, but the next ring out was a series of dense gardens, then orchards of trees, and finally expanses of fields. It looked like it had been meticulously planned by somebody with a bird's-eye view, with a desire to place labor-intensive crops closer to the city gates. Well, at least we'll have our pick of gates, Nathan said as they started towards the city. The assassin at his side didn't answer, instead studying the fields and the walls beyond. After a second, she swore. "Stalker shit, they haven't opened the gates. We won't be able to enter." She looked around. "We should find a place to camp outside until they lift the lockdown. I'd have bet Stalker teeth to dragon bones they'd have opened up the city by now." Nathan blinked at her. "You can't get into the city if the gates aren't opened. I would have thought that the most elite assassin of Gemor would have an entry point that wasn't just walk through the gates. But I guess with her skills that's the most reasonable thing to do, especially if they have powerful enchantments preventing entry everywhere else." She turned to him, eyebrows drawn down in annoyance. "My skills are myriad, but I do not have the insights of flight." She blinked in realization. "But you do. Can you bypass the wards over the walls?" He nodded. "Almost certainly, and at the very worst they'll just know that somebody busted through them. Let's go." She assented quickly, and they diverted into the tall stalks of grain alongside the road. Nathan mused on the crops around him as they moved through the available cover. The vegetation wasn't quite wheat, but it was close, clearly a few thousand generations of selective breeding derived from wild grass. It was also lush and verdant, dense without a trace of weeds. The crops were planted in rough rows, which indicated they'd likely been planted by hand and not by magic. They snuck through the rest of the fields without issue, passing underneath the dense cover of well-established orchards. Nathan grabbed a fruit he recognized, biting through the red skin into the juicy innards. It was like a single pomegranate seed, but scaled up to the size of his fist. Phelan shot him an amused look at the munching sounds. She chuckled deeply, then reached up to grab another of the ripe fruits dangling overhead. They came to a stop under the canopy of green. A gentle wind rustled the trees, and Nathan looked back at the beautiful woman as she cocked an eyebrow at him and grinned, reddish juice running down her chin. He chuckled in return, smacking his lips as he finished the delectable fruit. It's ridiculous, but it feels like we've struck the first blow on their territory, by stealing fruit. Phelan wiped her face and started pulling disguises out of her bag. Her own robe was the yellow of an artisan mage, while Nathan's was the green of an enslavement mage. There will be slave soldiers on the wall, but if we move quickly and do not attack them, my skills will hide us. Nathan changed into his robe, turning his back while Phelan stripped off her own clothing. She gave an amused grunt. Our paths will run parallel for some time. We should become comfortable with one another. Nathan merely shrugged as he turned around, seeing her finish fastening the robe together over her upper body. Her very shapely upper body. He looked away, judging the distance to the wall and deciding that this was about the right place to start from. They were still a few 100 feet away, but he'd practiced airwalking back in Housemint. It was much easier to ascend at an angle rather than go straight up, like climbing a staircase versus climbing a cliff. You should take off anything enchanted and hold it against your stomach. She pursed her lips and shrugged, tugging off various pieces of jewelry and pulling out a dozen knives from various locations. She carefully sheathed the blades before sliding the enchanted items into her dimensional bag. Nathan could tell she didn't have anything else magical on her, so he simply scooped the assassin up in a Princess Carry and leapt into the air, aiming for the top of the wall. He focused on speed, trying to minimize the amount of time they spent obviously visible. Phelan squeaked slightly as Nathan picked her up, quickly throwing one hand around his neck while the other held the dimensional pouch tight to her chest. She giggled, the high-pitched noise startling as it came from the deadly assassin. He looked down at her as they flew towards the top of the wall. Phelan's long hair blew in the breeze, the streaks of color like sparks as they fluttered at the speed of their passage. She wasn't looking up at him, but instead watched their ascent with glee, lips parted and eyes still wide with surprise. Wow, she's gorgeous. Then she met his eyes, her lips curving upwards into a smirk as she wriggled teasingly in his arms. Nathan jerked his attention back to where it belonged, guiding their path over the wall. He could feel eyes sliding off them, and bolstered the effect with his own skills, spending focus to deflect attention away from a pair of figures zipping up and over the top of the wall in broad daylight. He tried to merge his efforts with Phelan's, to layer them so that anybody who saw through her barrier dismissed them as a pair of mages flying home, even if flying over the walls was certainly not allowed. High-tier noticeability 3 achieved. Then he detected the magical defenses on the wall, and Nathan's attention was fully consumed with figuring out how to bypass them. He'd done this sort of thing a few times before when sneaking around in Housemint and breaking through the wards around the army camp, but these defenses were on a different level. An invisible sheet of interwoven mana stretched up in a cylinder all around Giant's Rest, merged with the crenellations on the wall to ensure somebody couldn't slip underneath it. The barrier contained a half-dozen different ways to detect anybody passing through it, as well as mechanisms to detect tampering or magical hacking. There was also a layer of wizardry enmeshed throughout the spell, which made the mana more stable and less malleable. Harder to mess with. Wizard Senses 3 achieved. Nathan spent focus to help him pry a hole in the net. He slipped a thin spike of his aura through a gap and weakened the nearby wizardry. Then he pried apart the weave, splitting the spike into thin tendrils that weakened and teased apart the strands of magic in the detection web without fully breaking them. Mid-tier aura manipulation 4 achieved. It was an exercise in precision, and it would have been significantly more difficult without Nathan's newest utility skill. He could also feel the benefit of anti-magic stealth, calming the spell and guiding his actions to interact with the magic without setting off alarms. They arced about 30 feet over the head of the slave soldiers standing guard and straight through the hole Nathan had cut in the detection spell. He released his hold, and the magic sealed shut behind them, the wizardry flowing back to reclaim the local space as if nothing had happened. The city beyond the outer walls was dense, and they fell towards it quickly as Nathan stopped running and let gravity take over. This was where he missed slow fall, which would let him precisely modulate the speed and direction of his descent. He could still do something similar with airwalking, but now it required him to push off the air with his muscles. The talent required subtlety, and he hadn't had that much practice yet. As a result, their descent was jerky, and Phelan's arm tensed as she clung to Nathan. She pointed with one hand towards an alley behind a warehouse. There. Flying is not allowed in the city, and we must move away from the wall. The traffic on the roads was sparse, but it seemed Phelan was nervous being so exposed. The pair dropped like a thrown rock, with Nathan occasionally kicking out to guide their fall towards the alley. Phelan sucked in a breath as they approached the stone cobbles at bone-breaking speeds. As soon as they ducked below the level of the roofs, Nathan braced himself and kicked downwards a few times, bleeding off momentum and straining to keep his passenger stable. Then he slammed to the stone alley, shock running up his knees as his legs absorbed the impact. He gently deposited Phelan on her feet. "Welcome to Giant's Rest. Magekiller has leveled to 119. Congratulations, you have bypassed the defenses of Giant's Rest to enter the city undetected." The assassin spun gracefully away as if they'd just been dancing, then bowed to him slightly. "I thank you for that performance. We should have begun this plan the day after the battle. That would have delivered a prophecy of fear on our enemies." She turned for the mouth of the alley. "Follow, we should spare no time now that we are here. We strike at the hedonists first, then move to my safe house. I must have some chatter in order to confirm an exact target." She looked him up and down, stepping close to tug down the sleeves of his robe where it had ridden up. "If names are needed, I am Fala Dha Asna and you are my husband, Nada Dho Asna. We have moved back from Scargus with wealth. We seek to open a specialty slave business, but are cautious about saying so. We seek an audience with the hedonists to court allies and pay our respects." Once his appearance met her approval, she fiddled with her own, losing the streaks in her hair but keeping it long and dark. Her nose squished in and some fat puffed out of her cheeks and figure. She also lost a few inches of height, overall appearing somewhat younger and less striking. Instead of an elegant beauty, she looked more like a friendly girl next door. From her lower vantage point, she frowned up at Nathan. "Your path doesn't let you make yourself shorter. The height makes you stand out rather blasphemously." She imitated a higher-pitched, younger voice. "Yes, Master Archmage, he was taller than an orc. Just look for the man who hits his head on doorways and you'll find the assassin." "No, well, maybe," he said with a chuckle. "It would take a while, a lot of stamina, and then I'd have to get used to the new height. I would have to do the same thing to change back. Anyway, I've got a skill called Forgettable that makes people forget details about me. That hits the target, so long as you are over level 100 in the class," she responded, linking her arm with his and guiding them out of the alley. "Such skills are worth their weight in adamant for an assassin, but my barred path would never allow such a skill." My deeds are to be remembered. She flipped her hair back, settling into the act of a mage on a stroll through the city as they walked through a market square. Most of the stalls were closed, detritus and signs indicating that this was usually a place to buy fresh produce from the gardens outside the wall. There were other open shops around, all managed by slaves selling everything from prepared food to ceramics. Feline Fala wasn't quiet, constantly gossiping about their surroundings. She critiqued the consequences of the lockdown, then started to pull Nathan in various directions seemingly on a whim, looking at various stores or exploring different directions. The diversions never bent them far off course, and she deftly steered the pair deeper into the city. It was easy for Nathan to fall into the role of Nadad, the tolerant husband walking his flighty wife around the city. All he had to do was look amused at her antics and gently tug her back towards the path whenever she seemed about to hare off in another direction. They didn't have much of an audience for the performance, but this wasn't about impressing the audience. This was about Feline testing Nathan, seeing how he responded to her cues and adapted to a situation without prompting. Apparently he passed muster, and she calmed down with the distractions. Low tier disguise 5 achieved. They continued deeper into the city. There were very few slaves in the streets, and the ones around wore a magical badge that indicated their right to be out and about during the lockdown. However, the mages didn't seem to share that limitation and walked the city without worry. There was nothing reminiscent of the detection spells of Halsmith that had searched for mage marks. Feline guided them towards a higher concentration of mages, and they quickly found themselves in a residential area centered around a small park, lit in golden tones by the glowing haze overhead. To the side of the park was an idyllic little cafe, where mages gathered to talk and gossip while served various drinks and pastries by attentive slaves. They walked up and took a table set between a few other groups. A slave dressed in a skimpy outfit hurried up to them, and Feline ordered curtly. Less than a minute later, they held cups of hot cider that tasted like they'd been spiced with basil and a faint touch of cayenne pepper. The 3 men next to them had been comparing brothels in loud voices while they destroyed a platter of meat and cheese drizzled with fragrant sauce. "I disagree. I find eagerness more important than sculpting," one said, responding to his companion. "The verdant flowers girls are creative and eager, often suggesting delightful ideas." The other man was busy chewing, and Feline turned and deftly inserted herself into their conversation. "You must have insights to share. Tell me, where would I find the best specialty slaves in Giant's Rest?" Her waggling eyebrows left no doubts as to exactly what specialty she was referring to. One of the men responded eloquently, glancing over at Nathan uncertainly. The glance seemed to ask, "Are you okay with me answering this question?" Nathan smiled back indulgently, nodding his head slightly to indicate that the question should be answered. Inside, he felt a sense of dissociation, as if what was happening wasn't real. It wasn't a profound disconnect from the world, but he was successfully pretending that all of this wasn't his problem. Yet, "It will be my problem, but I'm going to be smart about it. I won't fly off the handle at casual shit, because that would interfere with doing things that could actually make a difference." Another of the artisan mages picked up the conversational slack, leaning in. "New to the light of the capital. What is the weight of your budget, my dear?" Feline's smile grew wider, normal teeth showing a smile that carried an edge of depravity. "Weighty. The best specialty slaves in Giant's Rest." The last member of the trio guffawed and wiped foam from his mustache, setting down a mug of beer. "Go see Thara Dha Stedst. Her husband Lang builds the mental magic unique for every slave, but she trains them and sells them. You'll need more than treasure. They require weighty favors for every sale. They're in the silver square. Look for the sign with a crimson dart, but get an appointment first." The second mage smirked and smacked his lips. "They sell to archmages and brothels, Don't expect to weave that magic." He shot Nathan a challenging glance before looking Feline up and down, making no effort to be surreptitious. "I could take you to see the best brothels if you would like." Feline just smiled and tilted her head towards Nathan, prompting him for a response. He snorted in reply to the man's deliberately provocative comment, shaking out his robes and standing upright. "A fine proposal, but I fear we must decline. We are to visit my uncle, a teacher at the academy. We can visit these merchants tomorrow if you wish a treat." He offered his arm to Feline expectantly, gaze calm and intentional. I think a reference to a connected family and calm confidence are enough to communicate that you don't want to mess with me. Low-tier disguise 6 achieved. The disguised assassin rose with an aggrieved sigh. She dropped a few coins on the table for their drinks and then took his arm to depart.